Thank you for joining us tonight, Rabbi Shais Taub. Just in case anyone, for whatever reason, doesn't know who Rabbi Shais Taub is, renowned author and speaker.
Rabbi, can you see us? Can you hear us?
Okay.
Okay. So what the topic of tonight's conversation, Shaina and I are parenting coaches, and every week we talk about all different things regarding teenagers. And it seems like all roads lead back to parents giving their children unconditional love. Whatever topic we're discussing, it seems to lead back there. Now, what many times we have received questions from people who listen saying, okay, it's all very well loving your teenagers unconditionally, but how do you give something you never received? How do you love a child unconditionally if you yourself grew up with conditional love or no love? There's a lot of people that, right.
Yeah. So you're not going to like my answer.
Go for it.
Then even more so, please share.
So first of all, I agree with the problem. It is a problem. It's a real challenge to give something that you never received. Like, you don't even know how to do it because you don't have a model for it. It's not natural to you. And then not only you don't know how to do it, but I really do believe that love is a real thing and that a person can be filled up with love, and that when you get it, then you can turn around and give it pretty easily. So there's that problem that you can't give something that you don't have. The poor man isn't the one who can write the big check. He just doesn't have the funds in his account. So I agree that it's a huge problem. And I also agree with your first premise that everything comes back to loving our children. So if everything comes back to loving our children, and somebody who's a parent who as a child didn't receive that love, what are they supposed to do? Great question. Serious question. And this is why I'm going to say, this is why I said that you're not going to like my answer, because I don't know of an answer that avoids talking about God. There may be one. I don't know of it. And I could explain it in two ways. I can say it as a religious statement, or I can say it just as an anecdotal observation. The religious statement is that God is all of our Father, and ultimately, some of us have biological parents and our Heavenly Father, and some people don't have. I mean, they have biological parents. Everyone has biological parents, but not parents who acted parental. And so they just basically go straight to God. That's a religious way of saying it. An anecdotal way of saying it, based on my observations, is I've seen it myself, that the people who didn't get love from their parents, who end up finally figuring out how to do it for their kids, they almost always become deeply spiritual. And I don't think that's an accident. I think it's because they're forced to, because they have to go somewhere to get that love. And so they end up having it's usually not a linear path. It's usually a lot of ups and downs and struggle, but they end up becoming very spiritual and very connected to God. And then giving that, what they receive in their relationship from God, they turn around and they give that to their children. But yeah, so that's my answer.
Okay, so kind of goes with that saying of the relationship that a child has with the way that a child views God is the way that they will view their parents. Do you believe in that statement?
Yeah, but that's why it makes it even more difficult than what I said. I said it's a dilemma, it's a challenge. What you're bringing up now makes an even greater challenge, because think about it like this. Person didn't get love from their parents. So now the only place they can go is to get it from God. But their relationship with their parents has formed the way they perceive God. So they don't even see God as a source of nurture. And they have to get over that. And that's really, to me, that's the biggest part of it. It's that when a person's brain has been wired to be disappointed in parental figures and to be wary of them and to be suspicious of them, it's really hard for them to not project that onto God.
Right.
And even when these people are very, very learned, I'm talking about people who study the holy books and know exactly what it says and even teach the holy books. They're so aware of what it says there, they teach the books. But at the end of the day, they can't get their brain to stop seeing God the way they saw their parents. And it's a real problem, because who needs a relationship with God more than the person who didn't get love from their parents? I mean, that's the person who needs it most, and that's the person for whom it's the hardest, because their way of viewing their parents skews the way they view God. So it's a really serious issue. I don't want to paint a grim picture, but it's a really big dilemma. At the same time, I want to give hope and say that when I'm telling you about all these experiences that I've had seeing people who have gotten it and had that breakthrough, yeah, they had to have that breakthrough going through this relearning process of undoing everything that they had learned about parental figures. So it's really, really challenging. I mean, it's not easy. It's maybe one of the hardest things in life. And if it weren't so absolutely necessary, I don't think anyone would do it. But I think what happens is people realize that, as difficult as it is, if they want to stop the cycle and actually be there for their own children, they're going to have to do it. They're forced to do it. They don't have a choice in the matter. So then they end up doing it, or a lot of people end up doing it. So it can be done. And I can testify that I mean, I see people all the time who have done it. As hard as it is, it can be done, and it's being done.
So that's why we turn to you and we want to find out from you, because I know it can be done. But if someone were to ask you, how, where should I start? What would you say should be a starting point?
I think the first thing is to be honest with yourself in a very gentle way, and to just say, look, there are certain patterns of thinking that were embedded in my brain, not by my own choice, but that's been my experience. And these have created certain limitations. I mean, I think I could even rightfully describe it as a form of brain damage.
Wow.
And perhaps from a neurological perspective, it even technically is, although that's not my field or domain. But I think if a person can say, when you say brain damage, people take it as a pejorative. I don't know why it's a pejorative. If somebody was in a car accident, it's not a pejorative. So if they suffered emotional neglect as a child, and if that changed the way their brain works, I don't think there's anything, it's not a put down to describe that. So I think if a person's had that experience, I think the first thing is just to say, I'm acknowledging the fact that I'm working from a deficit. I'm working from a handicap. It's not an insult. It's a fact. Like, I'm acknowledging the fact that my pattern of thinking is going to lapse into certain established ways of thinking, and it makes perfect sense that that's the way that I think. I'm not a bad person for thinking that way. I'm not dumb for thinking that way. It makes perfect sense that that's the way that I think. And so just recognizing that limitation and being tolerant of one's own limitations and being compassionate toward oneself about those limitations, I think that's the first step.
And how about giving some parents the incentive to start this process by talking about the impact that unconditional love has on a teenager's behavior, self-esteem, and overall mental health when they have that? Obviously, there's no magic pill that's going to make everything perfect, but this is a huge, huge one.
So to give them the motivation, I mean, one way to do it is the scare tactic. I don't like it, but it works. And that
Okay.
is that
Let's hear.
if the scare tactic is, if your child isn't bonded to you, then there's only one of two other possible scenarios. One is that they're bonded to no one, in which case they're terribly alone. The other is that they're bonding to other people and you don't get to pick who those people are, or what kind of intentions they have with your child, or what kind of values they have that your child's picking up on. So that's the scare tactic. But I want to say it in an empowering way, which is people who didn't grow up with loving parents actually can probably appreciate this even more than the average person, which is, you know what a wound it left in you not to have that love. You know what it's a wound that never goes away. So you understand how deep the desire is that a child has to be bonded to a parent. That even when you've given up and you realize it's never happening, there's still that wound. So then think about it. That's how deep the desire a child has to be bonded to a parent. So if you're the parent, think about that. Your child really wants to be bonded to you, like deeply, deeply so. And, it's easy to say, oh, they're not interested. Oh, every time I try to initiate, they're too busy. They roll their eyes at me. They don't come out of their room. Okay, so we could talk about things that you may be doing that you don't even realize you're doing that are not creating the most conducive scenario for your child to open up and warm up. But we can come back to that later. But the point is to realize that don't be so easily dissuaded or put off or scared off. Your child deeply, deeply, deeply desires to be bonded to you. Even I also want to mention, even if you've messed up, like really badly messed up, okay, fine. So you have to fix it, but you can always come back, because it's insane to the degree to which children always want their parents. Like even children who are terribly abused wish they could have a relationship with their parents. Sometimes they come to a realization that in this lifetime it's not happening, but they still want it. Right. So if you're the parent, just realize how much your child wants that bond with you. And don't be scared and think, oh, I can't compete with their little friends and their Instagram and no, you can. Your child wants you.
What are some very practical ways that parents can do this? Because it sounds great, but tachless.
Let me talk about things not to do.
Okay, let's go there first. Let's go there first.
Let's start there.
Criticism. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. You have to have a lot of equity built up in a relationship before you can criticize somebody. And then
I love that word.
Yeah. It's an investment in a relationship before it's safe to criticize. And then even then you may not want to risk criticizing. So no criticism, no judgment. It's just not worth it. Expressing disgust. A lot of parents do that because they feel like they use it manipulatively. They think it's leverage, that if I show my child I'm disappointed in them, then I'll get a certain behavioral result that I want. And perhaps in the short term you can get that, but it erodes the trust. And in the end, if you're successful, then all you've really done is teach your child not to like themselves. And if you fail because you've pushed them away, then what you've done is stolen from your child the most important human relationship they have, which is their relationship with you. And you've stolen it from them because you've made yourself unsafe. So criticism and any form of rejection. Now, that's not to say that we can't guide our children and tell them better ways of doing things. I think people often confuse that and say like, oh, if I can never disapprove, I can. So then everything they do is fine. Everything they're doing is 100%. There's no grounds for objection to anything. Well, I'm not saying that. You can guide people, but it's like if you go to the gym and you have a trainer and they tell you a better way to do an exercise, that doesn't feel like rejection. It doesn't feel like disapproval, right? Because this person's on your side. No, maybe it's because you're paying them. That they're on your side. But what I'm saying is, when you put yourself in a position in your child's life where they know that you are on their side, I tell parents, you got to tell your kid, I work for you. I'm your concierge. My job, God gave me a job.
That.
My job is to take care.
I feel like a lot of parents may have a really hard time with that statement.
I know that they cringe at it. My child works for me. Like they think, no, your child does not work for you.
I'm the parent.
which means right. They say I'm the parent, which they think which means they're entitled to something, which it's the opposite. Being a parent is an obligation. It's an obligation. So you're the parent, so take care of your kid. And when they're little, you take care of them by changing their diapers. When they're older, you take care of them in more emotional ways, like talking to them about their fears and being there for them when they experience disappointment in life and they're trying to sort out what's right and what's wrong and who they are. So that's the way we provide for them. So you can't do that when somebody feels uneasy around you. So what I'm saying is, yes, you can direct your child and you can give them goals and you can encourage them to do things in a better way. Of course, that's part of our job, but you're only going to be able to effectively do that if there's a ton of trust built up. And so my first thing I would say is don't do anything that erodes the trust. It's just not worth it.
Wow. There was something else that you said that can we go back to the word equity?
Yeah.
Because I like to use that word. I like to translate it into connection. It's like kind of the same thing. Like the more you focus on connection, the more the child knows you're the safe person. And there's so many different ways you can do that. So can you elaborate a little bit more about connections/equity? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I mean, when I say equity, what I mean is that, like when you pay a mortgage month after month, so after a bunch of years, you look and you have equity built up in that house, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you maintain a relationship for a long enough time, you eventually have goodwill built up in that relationship. And then when there's enough of that goodwill built up and you make a comment that could be interpreted as disapproving or it could be interpreted as a helpful suggestion, when there's enough equity, it'll be interpreted as a helpful suggestion, if indeed that was what it was. But if you don't have that equity built up and you don't, but you're calling the connection, you don't have a connection and you're coming out of left field giving them, even if it's you really mean it as helpful advice, but you don't, who are you? You're going to say, well, I'm their parent. Yeah, I understand you're their parent, but have you earned the right to, parents expect that certain laws of nature should be just not applicable to them. You can wish that, but it's not true. If somebody who you don't have any history with, they haven't established themselves as somebody who cares for you, and they come out of left field and they start criticizing you, either you're going to ignore it or maybe it's worse than ignore it, you're gonna completely reject it, as opposed to somebody who has demonstrated repeatedly over a long period of time. That's why I also use that word equity. Somebody who's demonstrated repeatedly over a long period of time that they are invested in you, even to the point of self-sacrifice. Well, then that person has earned the right to be able to make a comment that may be a little bit, could border on critical, and the recipient's going to hear it in the way that it was intended. So I would say to parents, like, listen, you want to know how much equity you have built up? Try criticizing them. If they don't accept your criticism, that's not their fault. That's for you to realize, oh, I must not have built up enough trust that my criticism can be heard in a positive way. So like, don't blame them for not wanting to be criticized. Do you like being criticized by people you don't think care about you or like you? No, nobody does. So instead of being insulted that they didn't want to be criticized, go back and invest in the relationship. And then you might be surprised and find out that when you do say something that is like a suggestion of how to do things in a better way, that they'll receive it. They'll actually receive it. But if they're not receiving it, take that as an indication that you need to invest more in the relationship.
How
How?
can they do that? Yeah, because I know you said you told us some things that they shouldn't do.
What you shouldn't
Are
do.
there
Okay,
some
what
things
to
that they
do?
can't do?
Okay, I mean, shared time is very important. Sharing time together. Um, Also, listening. Um, Listening is it's a cycle, because if you don't listen well, people don't talk to you anymore. So it becomes a negative cycle. If you do listen well, people will talk to you more and you'll get to listen more, which means they'll talk to you more and then you'll get to listen more. So then it's a virtuous circle. Um, so listening. And again, though, I go back to my thing, what not to do, the criticism, because a lot of times when we're listening to kids, we have the perfect nugget of advice and we just need to interject, and they feel like it's criticism. Like, why are you doing that? Like, you could have accomplished so much more just listening to your child, and just nodding for an hour, rather than trying to like interject with, oh, you know how you could fix that. Oh, here's what you should do. That's not what they were asking for.
I
So
have another
listening.
I have another question
Yeah.
in regards to this. A lot of people, parents, think that unconditional love means just making it a free-for-all, letting your kids do whatever they want, no boundaries. What does it really look like? You're explaining it right now, but how to kind of like separate it from unconditional love and acceptance. It's not about saying yes to everything. So,
Well, first of all, I just want to point out that a lot of parents who are saying yes to everything don't love their children at all.
yeah.
And the fact that they're saying yes to things is actually because they're afraid of loving their children. They don't want to be emotionally bonded to their child. So what do? They substitute the emotional bond with um, things. They buy them things, they give them things, or just with permissiveness as a sort of type of barter. But it's not an actual intimate relationship. It's not authentic bonding. It's like an economy. It's like sort of a form of emotional barter. Like, I'm going to give you this stuff, and then you're going to, in return, you're going to have to behave a certain way. Um, so I think a lot of parents misunderstand. Oh, I'm so loving. Well, that's not called loving. That's not loving. I'll give you a very simple example. A kid wants a game, so you buy them the game. That could be loving, but not necessarily. It could just be, like I call it, barter. It's just a trade, which is the opposite of bonding, as opposed to what a kid wants a game. So you go get the game, but you play the game with them. Play the game with them. Well, I'm
Love
not
that.
interested in the game. Yeah, but you're interested in your kid,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I
and
love
that's
that.
what they're interested in. So you take it. So by the associative property, you take interest in the game. So now you're playing the game with them. Now that's a totally different thing. Now you're bonding with them. So just to clarify, a lot of this permissiveness is not unconditional love at all. It's actually, you see people do it not just with their children, they do it with their spouse. Like, people who don't actually bond, one of the ways of substitute, different people substitute different things for a lack of actual emotional closeness. Some people substitute emotional closeness with drama. They're not really capable of bonding, but they always have like drama going on, and then the intensity of the drama feels like there's closeness, but it's not real closeness. But another way people substitute emotional closeness is with this form of barter. Like, I'm buying you things, I'm giving you things, I'm letting you do things. So that's love. Well, that's not love. That's, like, again, it's a form of barter. It's like it's like the opposite of an intimate relationship, because you're buying the person off. So I would always tell a parent, um, if you love your child, ask yourself, how much do you actually do with your child? Like, how much do you actually do with them? I know we do things for them. How much do you do with them? Um,
Yeah.
and, and I know that's not the complete answer to your question about not conflating permissiveness with unconditional love, but I just wanted to clarify that a lot of this permissiveness isn't even love. It's the opposite of love, or it's a it's a substitute for love, or a placeholder for love, for people who are incapable of that kind of bonding.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, I never really thought of it like that.
Yeah. Well, think about when it's done to you.
Right.
Think about
Right.
somebody whose relationship with you is very, very generous but transactional. Do you feel close?
Right. Right. Right.
I feel like a child will know though if a parent is doing that. It's like spoiling them. They don't want to be spoiled, they want to be loved. And I think a kid would know the difference.
Yeah, intuitively, subconsciously. I don't know if they can articulate the difference.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So would
The problem
you?
is the parent doesn't know the difference.
Right. Right.
Mm.
Right. Right. That's
Because
exactly. Yeah.
generally people do this when they don't know what it really feels like to be bonded. So, like I said, it's a substitute for a real bond, or it's a placeholder
Right.
for a real bond.
Well, that kind of goes back to our initial title, which was how do we give something if we never had it? It's like the same thing. And how do
Yeah, it
we break
is.
that? It's a repetitive cycle.
Yeah.
So how do we break it? So I mean, how would a parent even know? Like some parents don't even know.
Yeah. I mean, you should look at your relationship with yourself. Like, how do you feel about yourself? Do you have any tender feelings about yourself? Do you have any nurturing feelings about yourself? Just even asking it as a question, like, some people, the only feeling they have about themselves is either criticism or survival.
Mm.
It's either those two. So the criticism is the self-rejection, and then eventually the survival mechanism kicks in because you can't reject yourself and reject yourself, reject yourself, reject yourself. You can't do that without a limit, because eventually, you'll you'll die of neglect. So eventually the survival mechanism kicks in. So you have to ask yourself, do I have any tender feelings, nurturing feelings toward myself? Like, am I able to um, recognize my own need for um, doing things that enrich my life? Like, I'm not even talking about taking a rest when I'm tired, because the survival mechanism will eventually take care of that. But like, do I recognize my need for like creative expression? And do I foster that? Do I encourage that within myself? Or do I sort of deny that within myself? And I think that's a good place to begin. Like, do you even know how to do it for yourself? Now, if it was never done for you by a parent, you may have a hard time doing it for yourself. But this is part of the process, is just to first of all see where it hurts. We got to know where the trouble areas are, and to locate them, so you can just ask yourself questions that will help you to sort of locate where the deficiencies are.
Do you think a child, let's say, who hung out in their friend's house, and in that home, that friend got a lot of unconditional love, and the child sees a difference between that home and their own home? Do you think that can help once that child is older and an adult? Do you think being exposed
Yeah,
indirectly to unconditional love can help them in their process of learning and growing
yeah,
and all of that?
for sure. And that's eventually what happens, is that at some point, whether in childhood or in adulthood, people will get a reality check. In really, really toxic family systems, the parent will actually isolate the child from others because they don't want them to have a basis of comparison. But generally speaking, at some point, people will get a reality check, and that's obviously very helpful.
Right, right. I mean, the Rebbe modeled what unconditional love looks like.
Yeah, that's what I always come back to. I mean, for people who know about the Rebbe and are comfortable with using the Rebbe as their role model, for me, certainly that's who it is. I don't. It's not my campaign to go around and holding up the Rebbe as the model of unconditional love, but for those who are able to look to that for their model, I think it's incredibly helpful, because Well, for so many reasons, but also for the reason that it helps us uh, it helps us to see what it means, like you were talking about before, that unconditional love is not the same as permissiveness, that you can have high standards and you could lift a person up to achieving goals, and you can do it all without the threat of rejection or shaming. You can do it
Right.
completely positive.
Right. So I guess if a parent hears themselves criticizing themselves, if a parent hears themselves criticizing their child, that should be like a blinking light that they need to start digging deep, whether it's with
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
and it's therapy is probably a good way to go.
yeah. I mean, I'm not going to tell people how to address it, but definitely, if you're extremely self-critical and harsh in your own internal voice, yeah, and you're a parent, you're gonna want to take care of that, because there's no way you're not turning around and doing that to your child.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of the time it's completely subconscious. You know, repeating patterns is a subconscious thing until you know what that is in your own, you know, internal family system, if I may use that term. Um, then you don't know what your cycle is, and then you don't even know what to break. So therapy is probably a great way to start. But again, I know you don't want to promote that here. Um,
No, it's not that I don't want to promote it here. It's that it's like, I'm a rabbi, so I need to stay in my lane. So if people want to ask me about spiritual advice, I can do that, and I like to stay in my area of expertise. So everyone has to know their place.
I hear that. I hear that. But as a rabbi, I'm sure you've had many parents come to you with challenges that they face with their children. Um, and a lot of times it just, the fingers end up pointing back at them, I'm sure. Because we can't fix the kid most of the time. Most of the time it has to do with the relationship with the parent. I mean, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
100%. No, I agree. I agree completely. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Shaina and I both have this we both agree. It's people think it's so much easier to just ship your kid off to therapy to get someone else to fix them, but ultimately when the parent is the one who does the work, that's where all the healing happens, when we ourselves work on ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does Hasidus have to say about this? How can we look at it through the lens of Hasidus, giving something that you never got, which kind of goes back to the beginning, what you were talking
Yeah.
about.
Well, it's what I said from the beginning, which I don't know if people are going to appreciate it, but if you realize that you didn't receive love from your parents and now you're a parent, you're going to have to go get that love from somewhere. And I'm not telling you this is the only way to do it. And if other people have other ways of doing it, I'm open to hearing. But
This is the spiritual path.
the spiritual path is ultimately is look, we're all on a journey. We're all on a journey, and that journey is away from our source back to our source. So we sort of come down here and we have these individual lives, but it all takes us back to the same place, to the ultimate source. So parenting is just one of those things that makes our lives a little bit interesting or stressful, but it's all to force us back to the source, and to realize that we come from a place of infinite of infinity. We come from, we don't come from scarcity, we come from infinity. We come from a place of goodness. We come from a place of light. And when life is difficult, it can cause you to forget that, but eventually it can propel you to dig deeper and to go back to the truth and to realize that there is an infinite source of strength and love that you have access to. And, in the ideal experience, your parents taught you that. And so they showed you how to access that source of infinite strength and love. But if they didn't teach it to you, okay, so now it's time as an adult to go discover that source of infinite strength and love.
And I love how you said earlier that, it's never too late. We can always work on ourselves and change our behavior. And anyone who's listening right now, if they want to change themselves as a parent and connect to their kids and stop doing certain things, just like you said, we have access to that infinity.
Right. Never too late. And you're not alone. And I
Yeah.
mean that on many levels. You're not alone. I can tell you right now, anyone who's listening and is trying to dig deeper and be a better parent, I can tell you at least 1,000 people who I'm personally in touch with right now who are doing the same thing. So you're not alone. But I also mean on a deeper level, you're not alone. Like, ultimately, this is a spiritual path. And it can be very difficult to realize that you're not alone when a lot of your experience, especially as a child, was of being lonely because of a lack of parental love. But yeah, that's what we're all here to discover, is that ultimately we're not alone. We're connected to each other. We're connected to our source. So I mean that on many levels, that you're not doing this alone.
It's a journey of self-refinement.
Yeah, self-discovery.
Right.
It's coming back to what was there. And good parents are those who reveal to their children these resources that are innate. A child is born with a direct access to God, and a parent's job is to inform the child of what they have access to. So if that wasn't done for you, so it doesn't mean that you don't have access to it, just means that nobody ever pointed it out to you.
So I hope I can phrase this question in a way that comes out the way it's in my brain right now. But what happens to a parent who thinks that their parents' way of loving them was actually healthy? For instance, they were controlled and manipulated, but they look at it as a form of love. And then they're doing that same cycle to their child. And so they think that that's what they need to give to their child, that control. And it can be in religion, it can be in their education, it could be in whatever form of control it is. What would you say to those parents that think that that's a form of love and that they're giving that to their child?
I wouldn't say anything to them. I'm way too busy dealing with parents who are exhausted to want to go find parents who think what they're doing is working for them. So if somebody thinks what they're doing is working for them, I'm not there to convince you that it's not. But there are plenty of parents who are like, this isn't working. My child's not happy. My home is not a happy place. What's wrong? And those are people I'll speak to. But somebody who says, I'm controlling my kid the way I was controlled, and I'm going to keep doing it because that's what works. Even if it doesn't work, I'm going to consistently, just do it, and I don't care, and I'm just going to continue to do it. Okay, I'm not going to tell that person anything.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell them anything.
Okay.
I don't even think that it's I don't know, maybe I'm cynical, but I don't think we should even bother trying to convince people that what they're doing is not working.
Unless they ask.
Anyone, life will either beat you into reasonableness or not. So generally, somebody who has any level of humility and honesty, they will be able to learn from their pain and learn from their mistakes and
If they
change.
are, what if they're saying, because I had a scenario similar to this, and that's why I asked this question. They know that there's a problem, it's not working, but it's so ingrained in them
Yeah.
that that's all that they can know. That's all they know.
Okay. So you're saying somebody who says, "Look, I know it's not right, but this is all I know."
They're saying, I'll say it this way. This is how I was raised. Look at me. I'm fine, but it's
Okay.
not working for my kid, and I don't know what to do.
Okay. Okay. So they're like halfway there,
Yeah.
basically. Okay.
That's
So
really what I was getting at. And so
yeah.
I'm sorry that I didn't formulate it.
Okay. So they're saying, I know it's not working, but it should work because it worked on
Yes.
me, basically.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So I would say to such a person, yeah, it should. You're right. Logically, it should work. If it worked on you, it should work on your kid, on your kid's kid. It should just keep on working. Well, what can we do? It's not working. I don't think it has to be much deeper than that.
Right. Right.
Like, let's just be honest. Okay, so it worked on you. I wouldn't convince them that it didn't work on them. I wouldn't try to convince
Okay.
them how messed up they are. I would say, fine, you're right, you're perfect, but it's not working on your child. Okay, so let's be reasonable.
Right. Right. And are you still giving your parenting course?
The parenting course is a 6-week course,
Right.
and I do it for the last time every time. Meaning, after I finish the 6-week course, I say, this is the last time, we're not doing it again. So I haven't done it in, I don't know, 6 months.
Okay.
And I haven't set a date to do it again, but we'll see.
Okay. Okay. So before we let you go, I'm wondering if you have any success stories from parents that you've worked with who really worked on themselves to give this love that maybe they never received, and were able to overcome, being a child who didn't receive love, and they worked really hard, and now they're able to be a healthy parent. Are there,
Like I said, it happens all the time. I began with that saying that it happens all the time. I'm not saying it happens every time, or it doesn't happen right away every time. Maybe it will happen, and I just didn't see it happen yet. But I've seen it many, many times, more times than I can count. And also, it's not binary. It's not either or. There are degrees of it. So if somebody would even be a little bit successful, it doesn't have to mean that they completely transformed.
right?
But it's happening on a massive scale right now. It's not isolated anymore. This is not 20 years ago where there were just one person who couldn't find anyone else doing what they're doing. It's massive. It's happening in every neighborhood. It's happening. I have a group of ladies who we meet once a month who are all graduates of my parenting course. About 100 ladies who, it's only open to people who have taken the 6-week course, so you can't join it. But there's a group of 100 there, and I don't know what percentage of them had great parents. Like probably a regular bell curve. Like one extreme of people had really amazing parents, and then the other extreme of people had really terrible parents, and then most of the people, like in the bell curve, had mediocre parents, like mixed. And so I see all the time people doing stuff that they didn't receive from their parents. It's happening. It's happening every day. So I don't even think it's something that we need to like. It's not a spectacle anymore. It's this in this generation. In fact, I would say probably the greatest characteristic of this generation. And I have different theories about why this is true right now at this time in history, but I won't get into that tonight. But it's so common. You're seeing constantly people breaking cycles and not doing things that were done to them, and conversely doing things for their children that were never done for them as when they were children. So it's really the energy right now in the world.
Right. Right. No, I just think it's so important to give hope, especially from you, who is, you know, just such a well-respected rabbi, because we really, oh, question from someone. Do you think parents need to own up and apologize to their children?
Well, it's a complicated question. If you're not going to apologize because you think it diminishes your child's respect of you, I'm going to tell you that's not true. Um, that's would you refuse to apologize to anyone else in the world but your child on the grounds that they may lose respect for you if you apologize? So I think you can easily expose that there's no logic there when you try to figure out if you would treat anyone else you care about in that way. But one thing I do want to mention is a lot of parents who are they're not really parenting, they're not providing for their children, they're taking from their children. They find out about this apology thing, and they learn how to make that toxic as well. And I warn against it. Every time I talk about parents apologizing, I always have to warn about this because I've seen it go wrong so many ways, where the parent, oh, I should apologize to my child. And they come with these morbid, morose apologies, which are so self-indulgent. And it's really like a repetition of the abuse. Because like, it's not enough that I treated you inappropriately, but now I have to turn you, meaning my child, into my therapist and listen to my crocodile tears and my confession, and then get you to forgive me. So I always tell parents, your job as a parent is to give. Always get clarity by asking, am I giving or am I taking? Am I giving or am I taking? You will always get clarity with that question. So if you go to your child and admit your wrongs and apologize to them in order to get their forgiveness, that's another form of enmeshment. But if you're going to your child to apologize, to give them peace of mind, to give them comfort, then that's a form of giving, and that's parental.
Huh.
Wow. I never heard of it like that before, and that is mind-blowing.
Right.
Wow.
You can apply that test to anything. Is it giving or taking?
Wow.
Yes, it is very good advice.
I never heard anyone say that before.
Okay.
That was really, no, that was like, because I thought your answer was going to be, yes, of course. Of course you should apologize. If you mess up, you should apologize. But wait 1 second.
Everything's about intent.
Yeah.
Huh. Wow.
See,
okay.
You're asking about examples of parents who are like being better parents than their parents. It's so common today that not only is it common, but it's so common that even sick people have learned how to get really into all this parenting stuff and distort that and pervert that. And that's what I'm starting to see, is a lot of these parents who really need to do their own healing and they haven't, but they become like, they're passionate about all this parenting stuff, but they do it in a really perverted way. And the way to see how perverted it is you just ask that simple clarifying question. Are you giving or are you taking? So these are wounded people who didn't receive what they needed to receive from their own parents. And what they're doing is they're trying to extract it from their child. So they're not really giving their child what they weren't given, although they'll tell you that's what they're doing. They're really trying to extract something from their child. And you have to be honest with yourself. And you have to say, I'm not going to gain anything. I cannot possibly. It's not just it's not allowed or it's inappropriate or there are repercussions that you don't want to live with. It's that it will not work. It will not work. If you try to extract validation from your child, you will come up short every time. Your child needs your validation. You don't need your child's validation.
Yeah.
Wow.
So a parent can do everything right, whatever is supposed to be done, but if it's coming from that wrong place, it's not
right. And that's that's why we got to come back to the original premise of the conversation, which is, okay, so if a person realizes they're doing this and they want to stop doing it, so okay, I realize I'm trying to take from my child. How do I stop taking from my child? Well, I got to go find the appropriate source, because I do need to receive. I do need love. I just shouldn't be taking it from my child. Okay, so then I have to, again, I come back to my relationship with God, because that's where I need to receive that. And then when I receive that love from God, I know that I'm validated. I don't need
right.
anyone's approval. Now I can go and selflessly love my child.
Huh.
That's powerful.
Wow. Well, I mean, I think you took a pretty complex topic and simplified it.
Okay, I hope okay, I hope it's simple.
Well,
I don't think, I mean, it's one of those things where you simplified it verbally. I think it's a much harder, I think, to implement
yeah.
fully, but it's definitely some things that I actually want to, after the live, I'm going to go back and I want to hear this whole, I want to
Totally.
hear it again, because I feel like this is so like practical, but so deep. This is so deep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I know that you said that you want to stay in your lane and you're a rabbi, but I also feel like there's a lot of psychology behind some of the
Yeah.
statements you made.
If
And
there's
yes, this is going to be
psychology there,
recorded.
then that's for you to read
Right.
into it. But I'm just
Right.
I'm speaking what I know based on my training. And if you see in it any consistent or any alignment with psychological insights, that's for you to make those observations.
Right. Got it.
So someone just asked if this is going to be recorded. So we do save our lives and we upload it to Spotify. We have a podcast called Teen Talk. You can find it on Teen Talk on Spotify. It will be uploaded to YouTube, again, under Teen Talk, or to either Rabbi Shais Taub's page. It will be saved on, myself, parenting coach, and Danit, Coach Danit. All this will be saved. And I just want to thank you again, Rabbi, for coming on.
Yeah.
It
Thank
was
you
so
so much.
My
valuable, so
pleasure.
valuable.
We appreciate your time and have a wonderful Shavuos.
Yeah. Good Yom Tov. Okay.
Yontif.
Thank
You will.
you.
Thank you.
All the best. Take care.